Welcome to the Developmental Trauma and Attachment Podcast and webinar for clinicians. This month's focus is on the importance of relationships in the therapeutic setting. Join us today as Josh Carlson, Associate Director of the Knowledge Center, discusses relationships in therapy with Darion Stephens, a residential therapist at Chaddock.
Welcome. Thank you for joining us for our podcast for clinicians, where we talk about the Developmental Trauma and Attachment Program here at Chaddock. And thank you for joining us today. Today we have Darion Stephens, one of our clinicians in one of our residential units here at Chaddock. So Darion, tell me a little bit about yourself, how long you've been here at Chaddock, and some of the kids that you work with.
Okay, I've been at Chaddock it'll be a year in July as a residential therapist, but I actually did some group work with Kirsty Reed at the school as part of my practicum experience when I was getting my master's degree. Okay. So I did that for about a year as well. So we're coming up on like 2 years as part of the Chaddock family, essentially. Yeah. I am the residential therapist at the Wesley Cottage, so that is our adolescent girls' cottage. Right now, I have 11 clients. They range from 12 years old to 17 years old. We get clients from all over the country. I have Wisconsins and Michigans. We've got one from Texas. We're getting one from New Jersey. So they come from, all areas to focus on the trauma and attachment. We are one of the, in my opinion, best trauma and attachment facilities in the country. And I think that's why we get such a wide variety of clients from all over.
Okay, wonderful. And so today we're talking about relationships and why they're important. Obviously, as clinicians, we often talk about the therapeutic relationship, but as we think about developmental trauma, attachment, trauma-informed care, what does the term relationship mean to you inside that context?
Relationships to me are everything, because I grew up with just a single father, and so our family unit was our survival tool, and so that really led me into this work, and knowing that some of these kids didn't get the opportunity to have such secure relationships throughout their lives. And I think relationships are the building block of everything that comes after that, and being able to have a support system in which you trust and you feel comfortable with and you're able to grow within, I think is the necessary essential for a kid to be able to develop into a trusting adult, and an adult who feels that the world is safe and who feels that they can trust other people. And so a relationship is absolutely everything for a child growing up. I mean, you're expecting a kid who doesn't have any skills to be able to survive in a world with no support system. That just seems unrealistic to me. Right.
So how do you facilitate that relationship within the context of a therapy session within your therapy room?
I found that throughout my time here, the best way for me to build relationships with my kiddos is to first get to know them and see what they like. I found that the kids I work with that have trauma, they generally don't feel safe anywhere. So if I can find activities that they show that outward enjoyment doing, I can get a better grasp on things that help them feel safe. So I look into that and I find those things that they enjoy, and I try to present them in ways that they can feel safe doing them with me. Yeah. And so we kind of pair those two things together, and I think that sharing of an enjoyable thing and seeing that somebody else gets enjoyment out of what you do, that kind of helps build the self-worth that they have and the self-esteem that they have, and start to see you as, I feel good when I'm around this person and when I'm doing this thing. And I think that really helps to build that trusting relationship where that client feels that they can then come to me because we relate on a level outside of their trauma. We relate on a level of something that they really enjoy and feel safe doing.
Yeah. What I really love about that is that I think so often kids experience adults from the context of, you need to do it my way. Like, you're in my classroom, you have to do it this way. You're doing, you're in my summer camp, so you have to follow these rules, where you're really talking about going to them, right. Going, kind of peering into their world and figuring out what makes them tick, what's a passion of theirs, and how to use that as a portal of kind of entering into their world, rather than them expecting them to come to you with this big, story that they've been through and all the stuff that they've been through. You are finding a way to enter their world. And I think that's just a beautiful way to say that. That's awesome. So how do relationship factor into the work that you do as a clinician? So when you think about that therapeutic relationship, how do you provide empathy, but also, that empathetic confrontation, so to speak, when Johnny does do something that he, that isn't going to benefit him in the long term, how do you navigate that while still maintaining the relationship?
Sure. I think in a lot of work with relationships, a big emphasis is on patterns and developing new patterns, because I think when Johnny comes in and he's doing this thing that's not benefiting him and is not going to increase that relationship, he's doing that because that's what he knows. He's done it so many times that that's okay for him, that's comfortable for him, and a lot of times that's just the only avenue that their brain goes to, is that automatic response. And so being able to notice that aloud and bring attention to Johnny and giving him opportunities to, we like to use the word redo here, come up with redos. What's a better behavior? What's a different choice that you could have picked? And let's explore what that would have led to versus what this one led to. And I think the more times that you can insert that and notice that helps that brain wire kind of jump off that path it's on, and it kind of starts to develop a new path of, oh, okay, I can respond this way, and this is safe too, and I'm supported in this too, and then look at what this outcome is. And they start to feel okay in that and comfortable in that, and then that becomes that automatic response. So the patterns and the noticing with these kids is extremely important.
Yeah, that's great. How do you introduce the family system? Because then you're kind of expanding that relational scope.
Sure.
How does that, how do you approach that?
I think, especially initially when we get clients, the most important thing, in my opinion, is that show, model, teach, is being able to show and model and get the parent to understand the things that you're doing that are helping Johnny. So that noticing and that helping him explore what those better options are. A lot of times parents are also programmed to just go to that automatic thing. They know that Johnny's going to act like this. The shark music comes up. They don't want to escalate that situation. So they kind of hold back and they don't help enforce those patterns because they have their own trauma. Yeah. So being able to use myself and to utilize our great staff to model how to work with Johnny and how to notice that and how to deal with what comes from that in a comfortable way, so that they also feel like they're developing new patterns that are safe for them as well. I think that's the basis of working with parents and getting them to get on a new page, and realizing that the past is not always how things are going to be, that things can change, and to have a little bit of faith in that, even though that's scary.
Yeah. So how do you approach a kid who, you said the word scary, what if the thing that you're trying to do, enhance relationships, is the very thing that they're wanting to avoid? They're maybe even terrified of becoming close to somebody else and strengthening a relationship. So the very thing that we're trying to teach them is the very thing that they're trying to push away. How do you work through that?
It is more common here than you would imagine, but I think that the biggest thing is we talk a lot here about like the model of baby A and the model of baby B, and I think getting the client themselves to understand why they don't want that relationship. It becomes another one of those automatic things where relationships have not been safe, my needs have not been met, I have not been taken care of, and they develop this idea that the world is not safe and I cannot trust these adults. So that turns into, I don't want the adults. And so helping them untangle some of that and understand where that thinking comes from, and then to shift that perspective into realizing that mom and dad are meeting these needs. Like, you're not seeing it because you're so stuck over here and this world is not safe. So getting them to slowly open up and see the need that's being met by mom and dad, and to kind of realize that that is a safe thing for them to be in, I think is really important. Because a lot of times kids say they don't want relationships because they don't feel comfortable in that. It's not that they don't want it, but it doesn't feel right. They haven't had that experience before.
Well, and I love how you use the phrase untangled. The visual that came into my mind is, Chevy Chase trying to unroll the tangled Christmas tree lights from the, and how difficult and challenging that is. But if that's your normal, then why do that? It's scary to undo that. That's somewhat your protection. So it's really challenging.
Also, imagine how frustrating it is to untangle those lights.
Yeah.
And if this isn't easy, why would I do it? It's hard to do, and I'm mad, and I don't like it, so why try?
Right. And then when I do, one light's out, and the whole thing goes out, and it doesn't work, and I see I couldn't do it anyways, or I can't trust you, and yeah.
And so pairing with that is a lot of that building and noticing the positives and noticing the progress that comes with that, because even though that one light's out, they're all untangled, and you have 100 other lights.
Yeah.
So being able to really focus in on what are you doing well, when I think people automatically go to what's wrong, because that's what they want to fix.
Yeah.
But what's going great, I think is really important.
That's a great point. So often, not only do our clients focus on the one thing, but sometimes as the adults who are trying to help, we can, we forget about the 99 things that they did right this week, and we focus on the one time they cussed out the teacher.
Correct.
And that can become the hyperfocus, where where maybe mom and dad, that's all they're focusing on. So sometimes it's helping them be able to recognize the other 99 things too.
Yes.
So what are some methods, or what are some specific things that you do to build relationships, in addition to kind of finding their passion and joining them in with that? But are there some other methods that you use to try to connect with kids?
Personally, as a therapist, I like to try to step outside of the typical therapy role as well, and finding things that work for the kids. So I know a lot of times when people think about therapy, they think about what me and you are doing. We're sitting on a couch and we're having a conversation, but for some of these kids, that's not what they need. Yeah. They're not in the side of their brain where they can talk about things and be logical. So sometimes it's getting on the floor and crawling around with them, or playing some type of challenging activity that I know that they can be successful at. So I create opportunities to praise them and to build them up and to see that they are worthy. And when they get that from somebody continually over and over, that also creates that feeling of felt safety and that feeling of comfort and wanting to be around you. I mean, this person builds you up, so why would you not want to be around them? Yeah. And then I think also a big part of my day is taking that 5 minute, I give each of my kids 5 minutes at the end of my day, and we just debrief. I'm not doing anything therapeutic. I'm just talking to them, and I want to hear about their day and get that last hug before I head out for the day and let them know, I'm going to be here tomorrow if you need anything. And I think that that's probably my favorite part of my day, is that last 55 minutes where each kid just gets the 5 minute and we kind of make closure on each day. Yeah,
that's wonderful. I love that. Is there any advice that you would give to other clinicians in trying to form relationships in tough situations, where kids are resistant or are scared of doing that, or where maybe the family system has just a lot of dysfunctional dynamics?
Sure.
Any advice that you would give to clinicians to overcome those challenges?
I think the biggest piece of advice is to have patience. I have come to realize that I didn't have as much patience as I thought I did when I started here, and that has significantly grown over time. I'm a very solution-focused person, and I find it easy to see what I think would help that kid, and if I do this, they're going to be fine and everything will be great. And I came to realize quickly that is not how it works. And as much as I want this kid to see this new pattern that I'm helping enforce for him, he may not see that quickly as I want him to, or I would like for him to. And so being able to have patience and keep doing it and not give up on that. And the same goes with parents, because parents feel like they don't have the ability sometimes, and that's hard for them, and being patient with them and helping them build their self-worth and their skill set, and knowing that the end result is going to be worth all this time. So to just keep writing it out and to keep having that empathy, and above all else, I think also to be able to put yourself in that kid's shoes. If you haven't gone through something that's traumatic, or if you've had a secure family your whole life, sometimes it's hard to understand why that kid isn't getting it. So being able to step back and say, if I didn't have all the things that I had, what would I be thinking right now? Or what would I be feeling? And being able to really relate with that kid, and I think that increases that patience, is being able to say, okay, I get it. You're not hearing me right now, so we're going to try again tomorrow, and just never giving up. I think these kids have had enough people give up on them, and so as our role here at Chaddock, we can't give up. Yeah.
Well, I really like what you said about learning and expanding your patience, and that sometimes as clinicians we can really get stuck in, well, if you'd only take the wonderful advice that I'm giving you, the world, your world would be so much easier. But that's not how therapy works. It's really about facilitating a safe place for them to find their path to healing. And that takes patience, especially when you know that there's a fairly direct path over here. If they would just take it, we don't have to meander and crawl under tables and behind sofas and do all that to get there. But we have to remember that that's their journey, and that that's what they need to be successful on that journey to really truly get there, and that it's not always about the shortest path.
Yep, you got to meet them where they're at.
Yeah. Well, any other final thoughts or things that you would offer to our listeners?
I would just say, to being in this line of work has made me very appreciative of what I did have growing up and the supports that I had. So I do encourage everyone to, reach out to your supports and thank them and let them know that you love them and that you're grateful that they're in your life, because that's something that I've found really stands out to me in my day-to-day working with these kids. So I've developed a much greater level of appreciation for what kind of support I have.
Yeah, what a beautiful reminder. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today and talking about relationships and your work and with the kids here at Chaddock and how relationships play a role. And thank you to our listeners for joining us today, either via YouTube or our podcast. And make sure that you're following us on the Knowledge Center at Chaddock.com on Facebook or Twitter, and just link up with us in various social media platforms. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us for this edition of the Developmental Trauma and Attachment Podcast and webinar for clinicians. Be sure to subscribe and follow the Knowledge Center at Chaddock on Facebook for future episodes and more in-depth content from the Knowledge Center. For further resources and training opportunities, log on to tkcchaddock.org. While there, get registered for Josh's webinar later this month, where he'll thoroughly examine the importance of relationships in the therapeutic setting. Thanks for listening, and we hope you'll join us again next time.